Hey guys, welcome back to the Gentleman Standard. I'm Yor-El Francis,
And I'm Cecil Burrows.
and today's topic is the mask. We're talking and discussing the front-facing and back-facing masks that men wear, uh, choose to wear, or sometimes are forced to wear. And I remember the first time I came across the subject of masks and human beings in that whole milieu was in college, studied Frantz Fanon and the book White Mask, where he was examining black individuals and they're dealing with black identity under colonialism. And I think that that definitely can be applied to men as a whole and men in general, and the mask that we wear and how we wear them.
The yeah, this the song "Mask Off" it. I don't know why my mind keeps going on that, right? From that standpoint, the Mask, the movie, things along those lines.
Right.
What this boils back to is, or pulls back to, excuse me, is when we talked about building your inner standard, building yourself up so your authentic self, and setting a standard and not following one. Um, the whole focus here and the theme behind what we want to tackle, and I'm hoping that we get into for those that find this topic enlightening and something that they want to get some notes around, is we all understand there's kind of a work voice that you leverage, right? A version of yourself for the studio, the boardroom, for the crew that you're overseeing, or your group, that you manage and lead, or that you're involved in, the triage unit that you are from a work-based perspective, or just plainly your group chat. That's not the issue. That's not the problem. Adapting is a skill set. It is what you're supposed to do. From that standpoint, it's opening yourself up to a degree, um, finding some level playing field and ground that's pulled in play, and ensuring that individuals know you can hang in the room that you're in. The true issue that we're going to get into is when you forget which one is real. Have you taken the mask off from this? And there's no room left where the mask comes off in these conversations. The standard that we talk about you setting is knowing the difference between the role that you have to play in certain spaces as a part of your strategy and yourself, and never losing yourself to the role, right? Um, that that for me is what we want to make sure we get into today.
It's basically code switching. Um,
It is
and
code switching.
actor playing a part understands that they're playing a part. They know they're
Yep.
performing and they know they have the mask of an actor, and that mask comes off at rap and they become whomever they are. But
Hmm.
the danger with us as men is that if we take on a mask and we forget that we're wearing it, it just becomes our totality. And sometimes people just get lost in that space.
Do you find, um, because my fear is when we talk about, um, the code switch piece of this, because that's taught. We know this. People will tell you, listen, you're going in an environment, you're gonna can't be your full authentic self, from that standpoint. And that's for every nationality, by the by, right? It's not a black thing. The code switch only. Others code switch. Um, Female in male spaces, and so forth and so on. Code switch is a part of the process. It's a part of your strategy. Um, do you find, um, in your field, in the industry, um, the question I'm trying to ask, I'm trying to be sensitive to, non-banking industries from that standpoint. Um, i- do you find individuals lessening themselves in that whole switch piece on putting the mask on, devaluing themselves to fit in? Have you run across that in the entertainment industry?
Um, Not that I can recall, but I'll say this. Um, Sometimes uh, wearing a mask is a necessity. Sometimes you have to adopt or adapt to the environment. Uh, Sometimes you have to adapt, if we're using Frantz Fanon's logic, uh, to a colonizer's point of view, because then you kind of understand that worldview. But I think where you run off course is where then that becomes your entire identity, right? Because it's like adapting, understanding, putting on the mask, wearing the mask, knowing it's a mask are two different things. Some people put the mask on and they can't take it off, and
Mhm.
it becomes the mask then becomes their reality. And I think that that can sometimes happen in your professional spheres. It can also happen in your personal sphere. Um, and it gets to a point where are you performing as a husband or are you a husband? Is it performance art? Is it
Sure.
this thing, this role that you think you're playing, that is really not lodged in reality? And I think that's where masks come into play. They can be danger zones, because then you start to veer into the conversation of, well, what's the true you?
Hmm.
Is it the mask wearing you? And are you brave enough to take your mask off at home and show the people at home who you really are? And that's really the crux of the mask.
The this topic was one of the catalysts as to why we're doing this podcast, right? And here's why. They've done studies, and you and I talked about this before. We've heard a lot of alpha male, toxic masculinity conversations where you're being preached to by individuals who are worth a lot, and their wealth ties back into influence, and people that you want to follow from that standpoint, which is not based in reality. Um, to be a gentleman, there's certain discipline you have to follow, right? To build this up, to set a standard. There's certain rules and discipline that you have to follow to make that happen. It's hard work to go through. Um, there was a man box study done, and about 36% of the men that went through this felt social pressure to conform to rigid rules, and 50% felt pressure to act tough. That was conducted in a study, and that's based off of people telling them, "Hey, you've got to eat what you kill. You've got to be in this room and be the one that's ready to destroy the competition and make it to the next level." And imagine putting that mask on when you're nowhere near that person. You never, to your point, you never are done proving yourself. You're constantly proving yourself to be tough, to be this alpha hunter, this alpha male. And it becomes exhausting because you're faking it. You absolutely are faking it versus establishing certain norms that says, listen, I want to be a better version of myself each and every day. And these are the unwavering discipline tactics that I'm going to do to make that happen. And it's based off of community and truth and engagement and kind of working that through versus being this rigid, masculine person who has to act tough around everybody because that's the way I'm going to conquer the room versus winning the room. There's a difference. There's truly a difference. And in the corporate environment, I run into a lot of folks that are trying to conquer the room versus those that are trying to win the room over. And it's because when you get down into brass tacks of where some of these folks are, this mask concept is taught in places and spaces for individuals who are not based in reality. They're in their own reality. It works for them. and it's worked for them, but it's usually one of 100, and the other 100 are trying to behave like that one, and it doesn't work. It just doesn't.
And and sometimes the mask is projected onto you. Sometimes people see you for your resume. Sometimes people see you for, the successful guy,
Hmm.
which is what you're talking about. And then you have to start, hey, buddy, start managing expectations. And it's like that's the flip side, I think, of mask. It's like when you're not even in control of it. It's like, you're what these people think in their heads you are. And that can be a trap as well, because it's like you then have to start, as you talked about, you have to start navigating and managing expectations, because all people see is this great successful guy and they don't see the whole picture. And if you're not careful, then you can fall into the mask wearing you. You know what I mean? And then you're working to manage that and working to live up to those expectations. And then carrying that becomes a burden.
I got really good about that midway through my career, because what I started finding is when I placed that mask on, and it was more so about impressing individuals, on how I was going to be perceived, or how I wanted to be perceived, and the ways that I acted when I had that mask on. Eventually, if you do this well, you end up being asked into other rooms. The rooms keep opening up doors for you, especially in the corporate environment. So if you worked yourself into a frenzy to where individuals are like, oh yeah, I'm impressed with this individual. And by the by, I actually like having this person around. That leads you into another room, which is, social at that point. What I started finding, um, is I had built up this image early on. It was part of my strategy, and it was my way to kind of get from one room to the other. And it became so exhausting because I never got to take the mask off, even in the social settings. And I truly was not being myself in those places. And you start having to manage different personas. And eventually it catches up with you to where people are like, hey, I'm noticing you're not yourself. And you're like, well, I've never been that person that y'all have been seeing from this standpoint. And where I really got good at it was when I started being, you've got to bring yourself into every one of these interactions, some version, not version, some authentic portion of yourself as you're building, your overall, your overall image and your overall brand within this space. There has to be a portion of you in this, because if not, you're playing a part of an actor, and at some point in time, you're told to rap. The actor is able to leave that on stage. I'm assuming you get this. The actor is able to leave that in their particular studio. That's very different in the corporate space. No one tells us to rap. All of a sudden, you've got to be in another room, and it's like, when the hell do I get to actually take this off and be myself? What I started finding is the more I was able to improve, the ways that I showed up, it wasn't about changing who I was. It was like, listen, here's some fatal flaw things I'm noticing about myself, and I got to fix this. How do I do that? And I started working on myself from that standpoint. I started showing up in the ways that I wanted to be, perceived, but it was really me, to that degree. So when I went into another space and was invited into another room or what have you, you got Cecil, you got the full Cecil experience. And I was comfortable, and I felt way more comfortable in those settings. And by the by, I wasn't getting the, hey, you're not, feel like you're not yourself. You okay? I wasn't getting that anymore, because they got me fully, at work and at play as a part of that process. And it actually had a positive impact around how I was perceived and what career opportunities and doors it opened for me, because people were getting the full Cecil experience. You have to, quite frankly, it is a hard truth in the corporate environment. There's an element of where you have to be liked. You just have to be. And being your authentic self, it ends up resonating. You will get to places that you're supposed to be when you're your authentic self. From that standpoint, a better version of your authentic self by making sure that your discipline and planning are following through um, from that standpoint. But being that person opens the doors that you're supposed to be in.
Hmm. The challenge isn't it's not learning the role. To your point, it's remembering who you are when the mask comes off. And I think like that's really the heart of the conversation. Um, it's like, who does the world need? Uh, is it the one that you think it needs you to be, or the person who you actually are? And you know, certain times and certain situations call for that. You know, um, you and I came to this country as immigrants, and so we wore the mask of that uh, immigrant. That's definitely a mask. It's a situation. It's an observation. It's a niche. It's whatever you want to call it. It's how people perceive you. It's how you perceive yourself. Until you stop living in that, and then you move and forward and morph into something else. Um, but I say all that to say is like masks are, I guess they're like a dime a dozen. And they come in all shapes, roles, and aspects of our lives. And to your point, who we choose to be with the mask determines our authentic selves. And if we imbue who we are as we wear those masks, then I think that becomes relatable as opposed to just playing a role and performing, which then becomes what it is, performance, um, and does not always translate well.
I will say this, and per your point, I think it costs money for for individuals. And what I mean by that, for can you imagine walking into any space and dealing with everybody who's in everybody that's in that room? Their primary focus is around managing how they're perceived. You've got a bunch of people who all they're caring about is how I'm perceived, and that ultimately what the mask that they put on is, oh, I've got to make sure they see me as X from that standpoint. Guess what they're not doing when they're doing that is doing the job. The most expensive thing any organization can do is have a room full of people managing how to perceive instead of doing their job. And that happens a lot more than we think. That has a lot more than you think. It's a lot of energy in maintaining that. And I've come across individuals in certain spaces and places who that's their primary thing is how they're perceived instead of doing their job. The mask can have you hide in instances until it catches up with you,
Hmm.
where you've opened up the access and it's done its job. It's done its job for you, but you have nothing past surface to pull that in. So the point you're making is kind of spot on. We've got to make sure that we're being mindful of that as you made the point, as you have to put on this performance, that there's an element of you lost in all of that, lost in the right, meaning that it's a part of the imprint and blueprint of what you're doing, that's pulled in. And as you're building yourself up from that perspective, you've got to drop the performance at some point because it can quickly convert to weakness
Hmm.
when you're trying to set up a standard.
And then there's the mask of, as Black male professionals,
Hmm.
we come in and we feel, or not feel, but probably it's a necessity to be twice as prepared, never look rattled, never be emotional, never make mistakes, and that in of itself is a mask, you know, because you are performing for what society says is the standard for this black professional in this environment. Um, and the mask becomes excellence. You're always excellent. You know, there's nothing else there. You're just always achieving. And that's not really life, you know. Yeah, you're achieving, but there's some downtimes too. Um, and as I've heard before, excellence can become exhausting.
Yeah, sure, sure. That is, it's interesting because yeah, African American males, we face this when we talk about code switching. It's baked into things that we may want to do. Can you bring your full culture? Some companies relish in that and champion that. Others don't. Quite frankly, being in banking is unique in the standpoint that I've been privy to. Um, uh, some of the banks I've worked with that have been fully 100% behind it, and providing resources and tools to make that happen. Others that not so much, as a part of the process. And it's unique in a sense, and what you and I have experienced being immigrants, from that standpoint is we not only get to see it but because how that changes is when everyone in the room with you is has the same ethnic background. So now it's a social economic separator between that. And I find that from a lot of my, we talk about it from a black impact perspective, but I find that from a lot of my white friends who are going through that. You go economics background. I didn't come from the side of the tracks where been given a lot of opportunity economically early on. I had to fight through the mud to get to where I am, or even went to the right school from that standpoint. So everyone feels this to a degree. So we have to be mindful of that, even being as black males, African American males or African males in the corporate environment or corporate industry. There are a lot of folks that don't look like us that are going through the same struggle and challenge. White males, Hispanic males, Asian males, Indian males, American Indian males that are going through this and experiencing this same mask related issue because they're trying to be in a room that they haven't been in before. And it may be one that's wealth related as the line that you're building towards, and you're trying to say, could you all consider me? From this standpoint, what's my strategy to have that happen? The issue is the performance that comes along that is you can't get lost in the performance that doesn't bring some element of you being authentic through the process, right? That's where we talk about building a standard that sustains itself as you grow professionally, as you grow in your career, and as you into your career, and as you grow personally, because a lot of this plays back to that. At some point in time, you got to drop the performance. Is there a room that you go into where you take the mask off and it's not all over the place? There's a place that you have, right? It's real enough for you not to disappear. That has to be a part of the process. Otherwise, it's unhealthy, right? From what we've experienced in our spaces.
I think I would love to ask the audience what mask do they wear? And they can text us the comments. Um, and then I can ask you this. When did you first think or learn you needed one? I know that the first time, it's not that I thought I needed a mask, but the first time I kind of understood that somebody was projecting their own version of me onto me was I had just started college and I just left high school in Sierra Leone and I spent a little time in Liberia and then came here. And so my worldview was very different. Um, and coming from a place where everybody's black, and you know, that's just it. Everybody's black. You know, I, and so being in America, I was quickly informed that I am a black male, and it was not something that was in my psyche. it wasn't anything that I would think about daily. It was just a thing, you know. My dad, granddad, everybody was black, so it wasn't a thing. But it became a thing when I moved here. And then I understood that that was a mask being projected onto me of how people perceive you. So it wasn't just a color thing, it was a perception thing of how, as black males, we're dangerous, this, that, and the other. All the various, negative tropes that people in American society project onto us as black men. And that was one of the first times that I recognized it. I was in an elevator with some people, and it's like it just clicked that they were looking at me in a strange way. I was like, what was that? And I clocked it, and then I understood it. And that was the first time that I understood people projecting their whatever it is onto you.
Hmm.
And it was an interesting lesson.
Mine was a major wake up call around the things I was the microaggressions that were coming my way that I was letting slide and go because I valued so much to be allowed access in certain places and spaces. And this was in banking. Just call it as it is. It was in banking. It was early on in my career, really early in my career, when I was in the branch network specifically. And dude, I'm pulling on like some major performance acts, right? I'm trying to be seen as that safe guy that you can be comfortable around in a lot of different rooms because, quite frankly, I grew up where I grew up in um, the area that I grew up in was it's a very diverse area, a affluent area, and a lot of families that were very welcoming for me and my family as we came through. So I had a lot of friendships and close friendships and brotherhoods and sisterhoods that are white, Asian, Hispanic, et cetera, that I've grown up with and still hold value as my family, my chosen family today. So you just you perceive positive intent, or you assume positive intent in all your interactions and engagements, and but even then we're immigrants, right? So we have you're set in those settings, and you get home and you start talking, from a Liberian based perspective, and those experiences on the weekends when you're with that family, and how those things are different, and the cultural dynamics that come in play, et cetera, et cetera. When I got in my professional career and I was really in banking and fully invested, I was willing to let a lot of things go and slide just simply because I wanted to fit in. And what I was realizing and recognizing is there were folks who are willing to take full advantage of that. Um, so much so that little things would be said here and there that I was just not really recognizing what was happening because I was trying so hard with the mask on to fit in. And there were folks that were truly in a very, very slick way. And this helped me early on to get a little bit of armor in play around you will respect me at some point. You can make it really, really far, allowing people to trample over you in corporate environments, sure, but they will never respect you if you allow that to happen. And one day in particular, a young guy, young banker, I was coming through, and I'm assuming had been allowed to line step for so long, that we came in and it was another banker, both young guys in the office, and I was at the time managing the front desk, kind of like the customer service guy, a young moving to banker role that was pulling through. And we're having a conversation, and these two guys are now in their office. They're two bankers, and they're having a conversation. I walk in, and one dude is extremely Southern, really traditional. The other dude is, you can tell he's more of a northerner from that standpoint. And he's like, "What's up, my N?" And the shock and awe on the southerner, who he was like, and these are both young guys, young white males, and he's can't believe that this kid just said this to me. From this standpoint, they're both early 20s, I would suspect, and I'm like, how the hell in my mind, and the thing I'm not proudest of from my professional based perspective, and I just played it off, which I would never have as I grew in my professional career. Like, this was the ultimate sign of disrespect that I had allowed individuals around me to be that comfortable that you can say that to me, and I walked away from it without admonishment or things along those lines because I had this mask on, this performative mask that I wanted to make sure I fit in, and I was one through hook or by crook. I was going to make sure that they saw me as a safe individual that you can let those things pass and go, and quite frankly, never address it. By the time I early in my career, by the time I really thought to do that, I had moved on to different things from that standpoint. But it is one thing that sticks with me through my professional career that I allowed the mask to allow that situation to occur. And there's elements of me that I had to build myself up that I will never happen to me ever, ever, ever again, or anybody that's come to me for feedback and insight. And I would never allow that to happen to my daughter. I wouldn't want my daughter in that type of situation where somebody feels though that level of disrespect is just something you should eat and move on and are safe. I allowed them to be safe in that scenario and situation. But it's what the mask does. And when we say it can be unhealthy for you, it allows you to let things erode around you, around what you're trying to fully build. That's why you have to be an element of your authentic self. Because if I was true of being my authentic self, that would have been addressed then and there. Like, no, that's unacceptable. You can't say that to me because I would never say that versioning to you from that standpoint and disrespect you in that manner. But I didn't have the voice at the time because I was letting the mask run me, and it was something that for me broke me down some pegs, and I had to build myself back up. But that was my eye-opening trigger. That was the things where I was like, no, I can't keep doing that. Like, people aren't gonna. And it was crazy. A leader of mine who, when you met him, you would have assumed was because he was extremely Southern gentleman, but he poured a level into me that made me build up levels of respect for myself because he saw the value in us, and a guy that you would never expect it because you would have thought, yeah, behind closed doors he's probably calling me that from this standpoint, but that guy was not that at all. And he made sure that I felt like the leader and I belonged in those spaces. I never told him that story, and I never really told anybody that story. It's the first time I'm really telling anybody this story. I'm surprised I'm saying this, but it was something that really had a detrimental impact as to where the mask can take you,
Mhm.
because it will allow you to fool yourself that you got to do whatever you can. But what happens is a level of respect that you lose for yourself when you allow those things to happen. It takes you years to come back from it. And I would strongly suggest that you watch that because it does that for you. And that's what, when we brought this topic up, I was like, I'm struggling as to whether I'm going to share this story or not, but it's the right time to do it because I'm hoping to inspire somebody else that they don't allow themselves to be disrespected in that way and allowing that mask to do that to you.
Now I'm gonna open up another can of worms.
Okay. Uh-huh.
It's a mask that we both share. It's the mask of the responsible son, and it's uh, it's definitely a mask, and it can be one that can be sometimes, I don't know what word to use, but it's challenging. And so you go through the machinations and you go through what responsibility is, and then you go through sometimes your rejection of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you go through working through it, and then clearly you always end up at, oh, you got to do the responsible thing. Um, but it's definitely something that I deal with, and I know you deal with it as well.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a certain weight to that, right? We should have we should have tackled that in the weight and what gets pulled through when all of a sudden everybody's relying on you to figure things out as a responsible son. You'll pull that through. That is a challenge, and that's another area where silence can break you because
Mm,
we need help. We need help in those instances, and what I would say for men in particular. Um, One, it's unique when the roles shift
hmm
because no one ever gives you the book that says, "Hey, it's going to be this year," that all of a sudden you own this.
Right. You become
You
the parent.
you become the parent. And when you do, no one tells you, okay, here's what you do when you become the parent. When by the by, your new clients who are your parents don't care about the fact that that you have become the parent. You can go to hell in some of the things that you're trying to tell them for their own good. And then you become not only the parent, but you become the mechanism for others to start seeing you in that capacity if you have siblings to say, oh, we need to go to them and you need to
You're the
figure this out.
responsible. You're the responsible one.
And then what has to happen is overnight you went from being a kid who still needs that nurturing, that still needs that hand holding, you still need your mom and dad to weigh in on certain things, and you're wanting, but you're realizing this is completely changed from that standpoint, and then you're fighting for the room and opportunity to be taken seriously from one, while others are like, no, 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 you need to lean in, you need to do this, you're doing the right thing, and so proud of you being stepping up because that's where other family members come in, right? Oh, look at you're thank you so much for doing this. Make sure you're checking in on your mom, things along those lines. And you're like, when the hell did this happen? From that standpoint, when did I get so trusted? Because y'all don't even trust me to cross the street, chew gum, and things along those lines. From that perspective, the and then you start putting on the mask of seriousness from that standpoint to win that authority figure that's needed to make that happen for individuals that don't necessarily trust it. And it's unique as well when you have siblings that you have to kind of manage through as well. And when exactly can you go, okay, let me take this off and get to be the kid again? No matter what, it is not something I figured out. Quite frankly, still to this day, even though I'm fully immersed in that and dealing with that. It's something that is an ongoing struggle for a lot of us that are dealing with our families, and it's an area um, where when we start talking about need for therapy, that I think men need, whether it be actually seeing a therapist or working with your community to say who else is going through this and what have you done, how does it work for you? Here's the latest thing I've experienced without sharing family business, which is the other thing, right? That's the carefulness that's there. Families want to make sure that you don't share everything for sure, but you want to share the scenario or the idea around how do you get around this. You need somebody that can help you to figure out how you frame your authentic self in that situation, because you don't want to be heavy-handed from that. You can't be heavy-handed from that standpoint. I mean, what's your thinking on that? That's a
Well, I
great
think that
question.
it's a mask, but it's not a mask that anybody forced on us. It's a mask we wear because we love the people who raised us. We saw the sacrifices, we saw their struggles, and we saw the burdens over the years that they carried. Um, and they imbued in us the responsibility of understanding that we would help when help was needed. Um, and so I think that's where, at least from my point of view, the mask of the responsible son comes into play. Um, and then we turn into the one who will handle everything, and the one that they don't have to worry about, and and it can be a wonderful thing, but then uh, if we're not careful, it can then turn into performance. And I think that's where character and understanding who you are comes into
Hmm.
play, because then sometimes you have to set a line, you know, and know that you don't want to cross over that line to lose yourself or to, fracture the relationship. Um, and so I think that's that's the mask from my
You
perspective.
know. You know what's interesting, and the tough part about this, when you're the eldest son, as an example, and our sisters and that are involved in this, there's an element of where they get to be vulnerable, even though when they're the eldest, even though sometimes it's even tougher for them because they have to prove themselves at certain levels. But what's interesting from a manhood based perspective, and I saw this and I was like, this is so true. Manhood is a precarious status, right? In that it has to continually be proven,
Hmm.
continually. And by trying to do that, you're always driving persistent anxiety. I was like, that's so true. Um, Whatever the hell that means around proving your manhood from this standpoint. And when you come into the scenario like you talked about, all of a sudden converting into the unique space of putting mask on for certain scenarios and situations and trying to solve for that. These are things that the point we're trying to get across is, don't let these things break you. There's
Hmm.
mechanisms to help you go down path on that, right? Being authentic, finding some element of yourself so you don't allow things to just completely present opportunities to devalue you from that standpoint. But being authentic is a core pillar of leadership. And people, when you get into points and topics, et cetera, and they start picking up the fact that you're not being truly yourself, you lose your audience, you lose your value, you lose your worth to a degree. And you've got to make sure that continues to be a part of your buildup of your brand and what you're trying to establish and the standard that you're trying to set, because that's your legacy. That's going to be how you influence your kids if you decide to have children, or if you have children. And the thing that the thing that you get to see and how you've impacted. And if it's not your kids, it's your mentees, it's the folks that have that value you enough to where they want to listen to your advice and you see it working for them. That's us pouring back in. That's why we're doing what we're doing here with this. From that standpoint, there are no fully right answers in any of these topics that, from our perspective, but we're asking those questions and trying to figure them out, and we're giving you some insights around the ways that we've been able to gain some level of sanity and success in our actions and activities. And we're hoping that's what you're pulling back to this. But this level of having to prove your manhood consistently can be damn precarious and create anxiety. So be careful of that with this
Yeah.
mask that you have to wear.
I just want to close by saying, some masks are sometimes necessary to wear. Um, but I think that sometimes along the journey, we have to remember, uh, like, say, for example, being a responsible son doesn't mean being unreachable. Being dependable doesn't mean being invulnerable. And being strong doesn't mean being alone. Um, I think that sometimes wearing a mask can get you approval, but I think being your authentic self and sharing the truth gets you connection. And at some point, as men, we have to decide where we want to stand behind and which mask we want to live behind. Uh, you know, a facade or our authentic self. And for me, that's the question.
The My way of internalizing what you shared, um, that I hope you all pull away from this, is a line I saw which encapsulates the conversation. The mask gets you in the will not let anyone meet you there.
Hmm.
Make sure you keep the range, but never trade the man for the role. Right?
Standards
Yep.
aren't followed, they're set.
Perfectly stated. Perfectly said.
All right, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in, and we appreciate you listening.
Y'all have a great day. Looking forward to our next conversation and topic. We've thoroughly enjoyed you all listening. Please leave comments, reach out. We're responding as soon as we get them. We've had some individuals reaching out, asking us questions and advice around different things and how the topics have resonated with them. We're here for that. Um, please let this be a two-way conversation as we're going down path. And if there are topics that you want us to tackle, make sure you add them in. Again, we're compiling a roster of guests to join us. If you have some experience in any topics that you think would be valuable to our audience, please reach out as well. We'd love to have you on to debate and discuss them with us as well. Have
All
a
right.
great weekend.
Take care, guys.
All right.